Hey guys, it's John and Stacy. We have a little announcement before our show today. We are hard at work on a bunch of other projects, so we are going to take a brief hiatus. But we will be back soon.
Yeah, and this has been so fun. We've been having such a good time, and we hope you've found something of value in this thus far. And yeah, we have some exciting guests that we're planning to bring on in, 2-3 months, something like that, and come back at it.
Thanks to everyone who's reached out to us. A lot of you have had great comments. And if you enjoy the show, please dig into the back catalog. We have a zillion episodes. Share them with your friends. And please enjoy our next episode with guest Deeki Deek.
Thank you, everyone.
So every week I start with a new theme song. Okay, so this one's for you. This is to Ta Ra Ra Boom Die, which doesn't get enough love. His name is Deeki Deek. He's an animation freak, and he's podcast guest of the week on the Showrunner Show. Blah, 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 blah. Kind of lost the low notes a little bit there.
That was wonderful.
Do you see? Oh, good.
I don't think I've ever had a song written about me that was quite so positive, so I appreciate that. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the song.
Welcome to the Showrunner Show, where every week we demystify some aspect of the job of showrunning for anyone who works in TV, who wants to work in TV, or who just wants to know how it's all made. I am Stacy Shabosky.
And I'm John Eric Dowdle, and we're glad you're here.
We are glad you're here. This week we're discussing writing for animated TV shows. Our guest today is Derek Dressler, who writes under the name Deeki Deek. Deek has tons of experience working in animated TV and movies. Most recently, he was the head writer for a gorgeous Netflix series called The Cuphead Show, and he won a Primetime Emmy for season 1 of Mickey Mouse on Disney. Deek has also written for live TV and film, and we will for sure be asking him about his experience writing for the infamous indie film producers Troma. Deek, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yay! Woohoo! Okay, we're gonna jump right in. You are our very first animation writer, so we want to know all the basics. Talk to us about animation as if we were naive little houseplants. First, how did you get into animation? Did you stumble into it, or did you run toward it?
It was a full stumble. I did not intend to be in animation. I grew up, the kind of comedy I loved growing up was like Marx Brothers, the Zucker Brothers. Nice. I loved like really cartoony live action stuff. So I never expected that I would be in animation because I wasn't like animation kid. I grew up like watching The Simpsons from when it first started. So I loved The Simpsons, but I loved what I found about animation that I just immediately gravitated to was that kind of anything can happen style that you see in a Marx Brothers or like Airplane. And so once I found out that that was kind of what you could do, then I was like running toward it. The first thing I did was like during the 2007 strike, like right when I had first moved out here, I was working at Disney doing what they call conforms, which is the script is written, the board is finished, the storyboard is finished, and then you kind of have to go back into the script to make any changes so that the actors can record it. And so that's what I started off doing in animation and got hired doing like Punch Up on a couple of shows. And they back in the day, the 2007, they would pin the storyboard up on the wall in like the bullpen, and you'd go in and have Post-its and you'd write new jokes and stick them on the wall. So I would work with like the EP, and I work with the storyboard artists, and they would sometimes, if they liked something you're doing, they draw the picture of it and stick it on there. And that creative environment, like I started firing on all cylinders. I just wanted to be involved with these people. And the environment there, it was over at Disney. The environment there was just so wonderful and supportive. And it just made me have a whole different view of animation.
I used to do sketch comedy and stuff, and it would sort of get into like, it would affect my dreams. It would affect how I would see anything. Like I'd see something on the street and it would just communicate itself to me as a sketch. Did the same thing start happening? I could see you walking through the world and just putting little Post-it notes on every little thing you see. Did that happen? Did it affect your mind?
Oh yeah, very, very much. And the thing with Punch Up is it's like a late stage kind of thing where you can make it better even after you think the ship has sailed. And what I found like at Disney was I got really close to the directors and the EPs on the shows that I worked on, and they would even bring me into the editing bay, like after the animation had come back from overseas. And you could even then do punch up, like off-screen dialogue or sound effects.
Wow.
Like one of the best things, this was like when I was on staff at Disney, like on Mickey Mouse, we did an episode where there's a zombie Goofy that's going after Mickey.
That's awesome.
It's a little bit scary. And at the end of the episode, it's revealed he's really nice. But there's a part where it gets pretty scary where zombie Goofy is chasing Mickey and he falls into a ravine and then loops all the way around the ravine and forms back, like his skeleton feet, his legs, and his body forms back. And the whole time that he's been chasing, there's been flies buzzing above his head. And so when it came back and it was in post, I said, hey, you should have all the bones. And then the flies sort of settle and and it was like a late stage sort of ad. But that's what I loved about animation is you could, like, if you didn't do that on set in live action, you wouldn't be able to do a joke like that. But in animation, you have the flexibility to do it. So I love that there's the flexibility to kind of add that stuff. But at the same time, with animation, you're really locked in. Like you really can't do reshoots. And so it's you're stuck in a way. You have to use the kind of pieces that you're given, but you can be creative in how you use them. I kind of liken it to like working in animation is kind of like that scene in Apollo 13 where they're like, all right, we have this box of stuff and we have to make a circle get through a square and we can only use these things. That's all they have up there. And it feels like it's that kind of environment. And so I just get really charged up whenever there's like creative problems like that.
That's so cool. And so you can like even late in the stage, you can rewrite jokes and can you change things? Like I guess as long as it fits into the characters' mouths, if you change dialogue.
Yeah, you can. I mean, depending on how like in post-production, there used to be a thing called the retake budget. That's gone. They don't do that anymore. But so now you really have to make it match the lip flap. But like when things come back from overseas, like there was a time, the first show I worked on at Disney that wasn't just Punch Up. The first show I was on staff was called Kick Buttowski. And it's about a little daredevil kid. And there was an episode that came back from animation and it was fully animated. And it was an 11-minute cartoon. But the director and EP said, you know, I don't like it. I've cut out the parts of this episode that don't work and I need your help. And so he would call me in and I sat with him and the editor and I watched about 7.5 minutes of a cartoon. And I said, well, you've got some time here to fill. What's the plan? And he said, I don't know. I got to work on this other stuff. I need you to take over this one. And this was like my first job. And I'm like, okay, sure. And it ended up being a lot of fun because you can only use the things that have been animated. You can pull things from other episodes. You can do still frame gags and have dialogue off screen. And so what I ended up doing was taking, there was like a cutaway gag about a cow that kind of booed someone's bad joke. And so we just kept reusing that and made a running gag out of it. And it became really satisfying.
You are the head writer for the Cuphead Show. Does that make you the showrunner? Does that title even really exist? Like, tell us about how live TV is different from animated TV in terms of like the hierarchy and who's responsible for what.
Well, you get paid absolute shit in animation. That's the short answer.
Oh, really? Okay. I actually had that as one of my questions. I was like, how can I delicately? Okay, because I was going to ask you pros and cons. That would be a con. It's
significantly less. It's a fraction, and it's kind of honestly embarrassing how little animation writers get. And in terms of the hierarchy and in terms of the title, it's not at all the same. Like the highest that a writer who's not also an artist, you could create your own show and be the EP for sure, but technically in animation, the showrunner is referred to as the executive producer. So whereas you'd be even a producer that is the head writer, where that title might be showrunner in live action, that's just not how it works in animation. But I've kind of accepted that, because I found that on like the show I mentioned, Kick Buttowski, and then I went on to the Mickey Mouse shorts, those experiences working with, I think the best artists in television animation, like some of the best people, and working on shows that I found to be hugely creative and rewarding, it was totally worth it for me. It's totally worth it even now to think, like, if I could have an opportunity where I'm in that situation, because I guess the benefit of it is that you while you don't have the same money, and you don't have the same the same union, and you don't have the same title. It's completely different. All that's completely different. We're under the Animation Guild, so it's a whole different union.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't realize it's not WGA.
Yeah, we're not in the WGA. And then every time that it comes up for our union to go on strike, we don't really get the same support, the writers in that guild. So it's a really weird kind of place to be at. But the cool part, what I found, the thing that I love to do is work with the team, on Kick Butowski and then on Mickey Mouse and on Cuphead. It was the kind of experience where I know the person who's the executive producer. I know they're not gonna make a bad show. They're going to leave it all on the floor. They're going to make something great. And I'm super proud of the Mickey shorts and on the Cuphead Show. And the benefit of it is that you can basically mold the writing and do it however you want, the process. On Cuphead, I never once sent in a script. I never sent in a script for notes. I never got written notes. And the reason I was able to do that is because I know I've worked with everybody for years. We've had great experiences together. And so I can say something like, hey, how about, I just acted out for you. And so I'd pin up my episode on cards, and we called it a card pitch. It's what I did on Mickey Mouse. It's what I did on Cuphead. And every single episode, I'd get up in front of the whole crew and I would act out, do the voices and act out the thing. And then, the next time that anybody would see it, it was a full storyboard. So the board artist then comes in and they pitch it. And that's typically not how it works in animation. But what we found is it gave us a shortcut of everybody they get it. They hear the whole episode and they can give their notes on a granular level or on big picture. And there's no questions. There's not questions but what's going to happen? And what about this? And what about that? It's you see it all right there.
Yeah.
And so that the next time you're looking at the episode, it's been drawn and it's all spelled out and it's very clear. And it just, everything sailed through. Every episode that we pitched like that, it was made.
Dude.
So that process was so creatively rewarding for me that it's I would repeat that again every day for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I can't imagine a workflow that would stress me out worse than okay, John, get up there in front of everyone, act the whole episode out. I'd be oh my God, do you come from an acting background? Are you comfortable doing that kind of thing?
Yeah, my parents met in Godspell in community theater.
What?
And
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, and I did theater with them when I was a kid, when I was 10 and 11. I was backstage worker. And then in high school, I was actually the president of the International Thespian Society.
You were?
Incredible.
I'm a huge musical theater fan.
Oh my God. Awesome.
But so it was what we found is on the Mickey Mouse shorts, they wanted Mickey to be funny, but they didn't know how Mickey was going to be funny. And I said, well, what if he's kind of like Larry David, he's the everyman, but he kind of gets punished. And so I just would start to act out little scenes, and it seemed to go well. And so we just started to do that, where I kind of acted out. And at Netflix, during the Cuphead Show, they'd never done the process like that before. But as soon as we kind of saw it works, everybody gets it. And then you get the whole crew. It was 100 people in the room. The people that are going to have to draw all this stuff that I'm coming up with, they're in the room and they're giving either their support by saying, yeah, we like this, we're excited about it. Or they'll tell you, they'll tell you this is going to be a tough one. We don't know if we can do all this. So you get that feedback right in the room. And it feels like all the stuff that would normally take just all this back and forth of notes and people overthinking or underthinking what they're going to say, you just kind of eliminate all that.
Yeah.
And it would just, it makes me feel so much less crazed.
Yeah. Hey, Deek, I have a question. When you do actually put it on the page, because at some point you probably have to put it on the page, right? When you do, is it just 4 pages for a minute on screen? Because I was thinking, watching Cuphead, there are so many visual gags and jokes. I don't know that, 1 minute would just have you'd almost have to write it like a list with dash, this happens, dash, that. Do you do that? Does it become a list of visual bits? Do you know what I mean? Am I articulating this?
Yeah. No, it's, I mean, Cuphead isn't super montagey, but I know what you mean. It's more it's the thing for me, the easiest thing for me is I'll go off and write everything in a notebook, longhand. Okay. And we didn't have a set length on Cuphead. Like the big benefit was you could do an episode that was 9 minutes, or you could do an episode that was 20 minutes. And they gave us a lot of leeway, which is unheard of. I mean, you'd never hear of, like, especially an animated show. They want to know how many can we fit into a half hour, but it was unheard of. But I would just write everything longhand and then type it up. And so when I act out my pitch script, it's like essentially it's in a script format. So when later I have to go back and do a conform after the board is done so the actors can record it, it's kind of done. It just makes some small tweaks. So it's pretty much page a minute. It's the same thing. But what's great about it is, like, in animation, it sort of has trained me to think visually. Yeah. So I can do more without having a lot of banter. I can do more without having things explained in dialogue. And it's super satisfying, because if you have stuff that's playing on a purely visual level and you understand it, like, instantly, like, there's something primal about that, like there's something like primal and immediate about it. And so I kind of always try to make everything as visual as possible. But at the end of the day, you're right. It does have to become a script, because the actors need to record from it. So you do have to keep that in mind too, that it has to kind of look normal. But the good news is we could have our kind of weird process, because we knew that it wasn't going to be sent off for people to look at, like, in a bubble.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's so interesting.
Really
the
cool.
Script is mostly meant to serve the actors. Like, we talk about this a lot, that scripts are meant to, one script for one episode serves so many different purposes. It's like, it's a pitch and it's getting you a buyer, and then you're using it to communicate with the executives, and then you're using it to communicate with, the line producers. And it communicates so many different things to so many different people along the way before it ever gets in an actor's hand. And it sounds like with yours, because of that pitch process that you came up with, that really the script is mostly there just to serve the actors saying dialogue in a microphone, which is super cool.
Yeah, I mean, it makes everything feel a little more organic. It gives the storyboard artists a little more ownership. Because the thing that we always said was, I wrote the episodes, like, I would go off on my own and work on them at night, and, like, write them longhand, and then go into work the next day and type it up and then present it to the team, which is, another 4 people, the 2 directors, and the EP. And so we had our sort of, like, little brain trust. So we'd hatch the ideas together. I'd go off and flesh it out, and then we'd come back and kind of punch it up and make it better. But the understanding was always, with the storyboard team, if they had a better joke and they had something they wanted to try out, that they could always do it. It's like the best joke or the best solution wins. And our EP, Dave Wasson, he's been in animation for a long time. I worked with him on Mickey Mouse, and he's so good about tracking all of the various things. Like he knows, it's like, yeah, that's a funny joke, and that's going to be a funny scene or a funny visual, but it's going to cost us later. It's going to cost us in post-production. It's going to cost too much to animate that, and we've got to, like, strip it down a little bit. And so he's been around the block, and he knows, like, how, like, what's going to be doable, and what's going to take away resources from the overall. Okay. And so it was a wonderful experience to work with him, because when you can, I'm sure it's the same in live action for you guys, but if you know that you have somebody who's going to see it through and it's going to get better, it's not going to get worse. Right. It's just like you can sleep so much better. Sure.
Yeah. So true. And you touched on something I wanted to ask more about is the idea, like, in live action, when writers turn in a script and they're like, it's this character is, in a helicopter in the rain at night, and you're like, okay, there's so many things that, with children and animals that, you're
like, expensive.
Kind of the things that are going to bog down a script in the process to getting it made. And there's just little ways you can simplify things, like see someone get out of a helicopter that's already on the ground is cheaper than landing it and then having, little things like that. Like, what are the things in animation that, that bog you down? Like, what are the complications? Because I would think with animation, you could just do anything. It's animation. But what are is it complex movements? Like, what is it that bogs things down?
I mean, that really depends on each sort of show. Each thing is its own unique experience. Like every, not just the show itself and the world that the show is in, but the budget of that show, who you're working with. Like there's some projects you work on where the people who have to decide whether or not you get retake money don't really have a lot of creativity. And so to them, it's like they just see the dollar signs. And so that's the kind of, I think, struggle that anybody in any part of this industry would face. But in animation, the thing that I see other writers do that's incredibly frustrating is they're not evoking an image. Like, they're not thinking of an image. They're thinking of everything else, maybe. Like, they're thinking of, what do I want to happen? And what do I want the character to do? And they're not thinking about, like, what are you conveying to the audience? So much of the time, like, there's not a consideration of what are we actually looking at. So I think, like, in animation, it's specifically important. Like, you have to be evoking images all the time and justifying, well, why is that there?
I want to know about some of the nitty gritty stuff about, you talked about pay, not so great, creativity, amazing. What about stuff like, is working in animation more stable? Can you roll from sort of one thing to another? Is it what are the hours like?
I mean, I think that's probably going to be fairly aligned. The stability will be aligned with any other part of the industry. It's not stable at all. I think like most of the industry, it comes in waves. You know, it's like there are times when there's boom time in animation and everybody has a job and all the good people that you normally would want to work with are gainfully employed other places. So you got to work to find people. And then there are times like now where there's a wealth of really talented people that should be working nonstop that are looking for work. So it really just depends on kind of the state of the industry. But I think now there's there's a lot of uncertainty in animation because, like, while adult animation is taking off and there's a lot more being invested in that front, kids, not so much. There's especially original stuff. It's just like in the live action. It's just the same kind of thing where there's reboots. Let's do another SpongeBob. It's things like that. Versus it's a lot harder, I think, to take a risk. Like, it's the equivalent of, like, in like the superhero world, to do an original superhero that no one's ever heard of before. It would be crazy. Like, they would be, the reason that they do those movies is because there's a baseline, there's something pre-existing. And it's the same thing in animation. Like, to do an animated show, it costs so much money that they want to know that there's something that's pre-existing that people are going to be coming from.
What about hours?
Yeah, hours. I mean, like, I've never worked anywhere where the hours were just completely brutal. But it's the same thing, I think, that you'd face anywhere. If you want it to be good and you really care about it and you want to give it your all, you're going to put in more time. That's why, like, on the Cuphead Show, for example, like, the thing that I found that worked super, super well is during my work hours, like at the office, I would soak up any kind of images and ideas that anybody had based on, like, a little premise that I would give them. And then I'd go home and be on my own, like, and I have ADHD, so I need to, like, remove myself from screens. And so I would go to, like, the Starbucks or the corner bakery and sit with a notebook and just sit there until they kick me out. And the next morning I'd go in, I'd type up all my stuff. And so those hours, if you think about it, I had no life. But the trade-off was I knew that I was going to be working on something that was going to be good. And so I told my bosses, whatever you need. Like, there were times where they'd say, hey, we need another pitch this week. We need to have 2 pitches. So we need 2 scripts basically this week. And I'd have to work extra hard, and I don't get any bonus or anything like that, but it's worth it because I know that if I bust my ass now, that it's going to make it easier for the storyboard artists and everybody else because they're going to have time to execute it and make it good. So it's just like a mentality thing. I'm sure it's the same for you guys, like in live action, that there are times you could say, yeah, I'm done. But if you gave it that extra attention and you give it a little bit more, you're going to feel better.
And how close to, like, I know in live action, sometimes your room is going while production is happening. Sometimes, they want all scripts written before production, and sometimes it's some combination. Like, how is it in animation? Is it usually the writing and the animate? Like, it sounds like it's all kind of wrapped up together every step of the way. Is that about right?
Yeah, it starts off, like, of course, at the beginning, because I sort of run the writing room, so I know that I have the EP and I have the 2 directors and the co-EP. Like, I have them for a couple of months, and then the staff will show up. and then production will start, and your 3 days a week with them will go down to 2 days, and then it will get smaller and smaller and smaller. And so by the end, like the last third of the episodes that we did, I interacted with them maybe 2 hours a week. And so what's great though is that in those early stages, if you like, my strategy is sort of always to make the most of that time. Like I just exert myself to get as many ideas on the board as I can, so that when we're struggling, or if we're like, we don't have any ideas, I'm like, yeah, remember this? We had this one. We can pull this out. We can pull this out. And so you're laying all that groundwork and you're getting to know everybody in the room. That stuff becomes hugely valuable later because you're often not in the same room very much anymore. So when the directors are off over here and the EP is over there in post, that early experience, you have the confidence to know like we're all on the same page. We all kind of know the goal, like what we're going after.
That's great. Like
one of the things that my favorite things that we did on the Cuphead Show was it was called A Very Devil Christmas, and our villain on the show is the devil. The main character owes his soul to the devil, so it's a family show. But like we wanted to do like a devil Christmas story, and we had like 3 ideas. We had 3 ideas that were very compelling to us. Like maybe the devil has like a curse where he has to become Santa every year, or maybe it's the devil wants to get on the nice list, or maybe it's like, so we had all these different ideas, and we had those ideas very early on when we were all in the same room. And then production picked up, and we're hurtling toward the holiday. And I'm like a weirdo with the holidays. I don't want to do a Christmas, like I don't want to be writing a Christmas episode in June. So like I wrote the Christmas episode so I could pitch it before Christmas. And I'm sitting at the corner bakery with all the notes that we had in our early days, and it clicks. It just was like, wait a minute. I don't have to pick which of these 3 ideas it is. It's all 3. And it just clicked. It's all of these ideas. They can work together. And the episode it came out so fast. So like those early things that you do as a group, when you get a sense of like, what does this group like? What do they respond to? What is each person kind of bringing to it? Having that early on, you just got to milk that and grab as much as you can. And it was very much like on, I learned this on Mickey Mouse. We had a room, like about 5 people. And every now and then John Lasseter would come in and he'd join us. And it was just like this infusion of energy. And what was amazing about those kind of moments is if you're strategic, and you're thinking ahead, it's like, what can we present to John Lasseter, that will get him excited? That's gonna be like, I love that idea. So we hatched like a bunch of ideas with him in the room. And then way later, when he came back again, we'd pull those ideas back up. Remember this? We've been working on this idea. Remember this one? We've been working on that. And then he's excited. So it's like the excitement and the energy, it just feeds the room. And it's like finding ways to like take that energy and take that stuff you're excited about and prolong it and bring it back and don't forget it and bring that stuff back in. It just renews you, and it makes you feel like, oh, right, that's why I love this idea. Or, oh, right, remember that one? Like I think the approach of like, I've got a million of them, you don't like this one. What about this one? Just having that constant energy is a good way to not get, sort of bogged down.
That's so true.
You have tons of stuff in development, and you do a lot of family stuff. You've done a lot of family stuff and a lot of kid stuff. You've also done a lot of adult stuff. And I want to know, like, is there a difference there? Is there, like, say you're writing for King of the Hill or The Simpsons or something. Is that a WGA gig? Is there can writers flow freely between those 2 types of shows, or are they like on separate islands? Or tell us about the difference between adult and family and kid.
Well, I mean, it's like really adult animated shows can go either way. Some shows are WGA and some shows are 839, which is the Animation Guild. And that's the one that I'm in. So it really depends. Like there are shows that are on Fox, like The Simpsons, for example, that's WGA. There's other shows that are in that block that are not WGA. So it's like wildly inconsistent. And these people will be doing the same material for the same kind of a show, for the same kind of audience, completely different pay scales. So it's kind of all over the place. But in terms of like, writing for a specific audience, it is slightly different. But I think I've been kind of spoiled because like on Cuphead, we can go a little bit more adult because it's
darker.
We can go a little bit darker, and I love that kind of area where it's not a family show. It's not like something that would air on Disney Channel, but it's a kid could watch it. There's not going to be anything that's inappropriate, but it could still be kind of scary. It can still be maybe a little more adult in terms of the humor, but it's very much nothing that I've worked on has been like a Simpsons or a King of the Hill, where it's like sort of an animated sitcom, because those tend to be more of the primetime shows.
Okay.
And all of this is to say is that of the complete opposite of like when I was working on the Mickey Mouse shorts at Disney, I was also secretly working with Troma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have this whole list of questions. I can't wait to hear about Troma. That's gonna be so fun. Actually, should we do that now? Let's just tell us Troma stories. So, okay, I have a little introduction here that says, you wrote Return to Nukem High Volume 1 and Volume 2 for Troma, who are the legendary producers of all those kitschy, raunchy B movies. What was that like? I just want to hear war stories.
Well, interestingly, I wrote a 77-page script that was turned into 2 movies. So I don't know how that happened.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of, what essentially happens there is they write the script and then throw it away and they just film whatever. It's not like a traditional, which that's just the nature of what they do. And that's the spirit of what they do. They like to do it by the seat of their pants. So really, there's only a few pages of material of mine that are even in the movie.
Really?
Yeah, I'm very proud to say that the one thing that did survive was the lesbian love story and the one girl growing a gigantic dick to decapitate rapists.
Oh,
so
amazing!
But yeah,
I did not expect that.
The most fun part about working with that was working with Lloyd Kaufman, who's the founder of Troma and the director of The Toxic Avenger, and he directed those movies. He's so fun. He's full of life. He's just, there's no filter. He's just the greatest guy. I had so much fun working with him. And he got a real kick out of, like, I'm writing for Mickey during the day and then going home and writing for Toxie at night.
Yeah, Toxie.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was so much fun. And I will always regret that I didn't get to go to the set in New York to get a death scene, which was offered to me and I couldn't do it. And it's just it was one of the biggest regrets of my life is to not get a meltdown death in a Troma movie.
Did you get to visit the set at all?
No, I didn't get. It was in New York, and I was,
hurts.
It was right when I was starting out here, and it was, I couldn't bail. I needed to show my face at Disney.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I had a friend, we did theater together, and she was a production designer on a Troma show, and she quit after a couple of weeks because she had to send her art department PAs behind a dumpster to capture real rats to use in the movie because they couldn't afford to buy rats, or maybe they couldn't do the Humane Society stuff. But basically, she said she was sending her PAs who might have been working for free to scramble to grab rats. And she's like, I can't do this, which I loved so much. I'm like, that's a production story.
That's like
amazing.
We had in Return to Nukem High, there's a duck that's a part of the story. And so the duck was paid more than me. That's my Troma.
Is that true?
It is true.
That's funny.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
But what's awesome about like working with someone like Troma is that they do whatever you want. It's like there's no kind of filter. It's like any idea is a good idea. And it really does connect to animation in a lot of ways. Like sometimes you come out with a completely out of the box idea that sounds like that's never going to work, but you kind of talk about it. It's like, no, that's actually going to work. And I think Troma really embodies that kind of spirit in live action because they do things that are a little more over the top and cartoony. But as like someone, I grew up loving like horror movies. As much as I loved comedies, I loved horror movies just as much. And so to be working in that kind of environment with, especially someone like Lloyd, it was so much fun.
That's like a dream come true.
That's so cool. With every guest, we like to do 4 rapid fire questions that just kind of covers a bunch of topics. And so we'd love to jump in on that. Question 1, what is the first television show you truly loved and why?
Twilight Zone. I remember being as a little kid watching Twilight Zone and just being amazed that like you get to do a different story every week. but they were all incredible. They were like little O. Henry stories, and just seeing like the way that they could do, tell a story about something that's not what they're telling the story about. It just opened my mind. Like, this is incredible. Twilight Zone was definitely the thing that I couldn't get enough of. And then the next one from that would be Seinfeld, which I saw as a little kid, which I was like 9 or 10. And there was a commercial that said, it's the Seinfeld airplane movie. And it was using the airplane font. So it's one of my favorite movies. I'm like, I got to watch this. And it was amazing. It was the episode where Kramer at the end of the episode is running alongside the plane. And it was so cartoony. I'm like, I was hooked. And so those two are the ones, and they pretty much represent the kind of tone that I like to achieve. Like a creepy Twilight Zone and ridiculous sort of Seinfeld tone.
Perfect.
I love that. I love that.
Question number 2. What is your favorite part of your job?
Working with storyboard artists, working with artists in general, like working with a team of visual thinkers. It's the best because once you generate that rapport and you get the rapport with them, they'll be honest with you if something isn't going to work. If something's going to be too complicated, they'll come and say, hey, can we try something else? Or, hey, I got an issue with this. And just having that kind of collaboration, because typically, like when I started in animation, the board artists and the writers, it seemed like every show they had like a war. Like the writers were mad that the board artists didn't do exactly what they put down. And the board artists are like, why are we beholden to do every single line of dialogue and all this stuff? And there was no kind of like gray area. And I like to say that I am that gray area. At Disney, it was like, I didn't realize, like when I was starting on Kick Buttowski, I didn't realize, that I was making enemies of the writers. But they, didn't like that I would go over to the board artists and be like, oh, you have an idea? Let's talk about it. But it worked out. I mean, on the first show that I was on there, all the writers ended up getting fired. And so I had to finish the first season on my own. And I realized, yeah, it was quite a first job. But what was awesome is I was working with a lot of people who had done the Cartoon Network shows that were used to doing boarding from an outline. They wouldn't even have a script. They just board from an outline. And so I didn't realize that a writer isn't supposed to do this, but I would say, hey, why don't we give some of these guys that have done this, give them an outline. I'll write an outline for them and then they can flesh it out and I'll work with them. And it ended up being so awesome. It, of course, made enemies with the other writers. They didn't like that. but the sitting with the board artist when he comes over, it's like, oh, hey, I don't have a line of dialogue for this. I need your help. Like, that's so rewarding to me that we can work together as opposed to being off in our own little camps and finding problems with the other person's doing. I just don't think that's productive at all. And you don't really get anything good out of that.
I love that. Yeah. What is the part of the job that costs you something?
Keeping my mouth shut about the idiots above me.
That's great. Great answer.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like there's times where like on Cuphead we had like an open writing room and anybody on the crew could pitch an idea. Like we had one person who was a PA pitched an episode idea that was made. And so I love that we can have an open room like that. And sometimes, someone's above you says, yeah, we can't do that episode because of this reason. And it's something that's just it's so dumb. And you have to politically, you have to keep that to yourself and not say to the people who work for you, like, the people above me are kind of stupid. Like, it's so hard because I want to be honest and just tell them the truth. But it's so hard sometimes to be political, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Question 4, our last question. If you had a time machine, what one piece of advice would you give yourself when you started your television journey?
I would tell myself to generate a pilot and a feature, not just a TV, but do a pilot and do a feature like clockwork every year, and don't fail. Generate new material constantly. Like if you're not doing a new pilot, what's a feature you could work on? If you don't have that idea, what's a character that you're thinking of? Like always have something that you're juggling. Cause what I see is there are so many people that I mentor a lot of people. And what I find is that there's kind of this approach where people have like, I've written a script and it's now going to be my script. I will sell it and then people will pay me from now on to write things. And it's like, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
So I think I kind of knew that. Like I always knew I wanted to just keep generating material, but I would stress that to my past self. Like even if you think something's going to be a sure thing, there are a million reasons why it won't go forward. So just constantly be generating new material.
Great.
That's great advice.
I just want to give a shout out to Barb Dressler, who is Deeki Deek's mom and also my parents' favorite neighbor. So that's how we met. So just a big hello to Barb Dressler and to Fred and Leah Shabosky out there in Pittsburgh, PA. You are definitely the most glamorous parents in your apartment complex. You're bringing Hollywood to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I didn't even know that you guys were you're from Pittsburgh. This is just, what a small world. That's just so wonderful.
Well, John's from the Twin Cities. I'm from Upper St. Clair. And my parents grew up in Duquesne. I grew up in Upper St. Clair in the South Hills. Wait, where did you go to high school?
Canon Mac.
Oh, you did? Okay,
yeah.
Cool. Awesome. You know, what's interesting is last week's guest was a director of photography called Todd McMullen. His wife, her parents were super important in the Upper St. Clair theater. His wife's mom did all the costumes. His wife's dad did all the sets. And they were great. And they volunteered to do it every year. And they were amazing. So there's some real Upper St. Clair theater energy going on in the podcast lately.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, it's like Upper St. Clair Theater, man. And that whole high school is just gorgeous. And like being from where I my senior year, the whole place was being renovated. And so to go over there and everything's just pristine and beautiful, it was, oh my God, this is amazing.
That's awesome. I love that. If you like our show, please consider taking a minute to subscribe and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. And please tell a friend. That all really helps us find our audience. And hey, Deek, we haven't done this before, but we got to start doing it now. Do you have any socials you want to share? You can find me on Flibbity Flibbity.
Yes, you can find me at Deeki Deek, DEEKIDEKE on Twitter and on Instagram. And if you don't click the like and subscribe button for the Showrunners podcast, I don't know what is going on with you. You've got to just click those buttons. Smash those buttons.
Smash that subscribe button. Yes, I like that energy. Okay, we're going to add all that stuff to the show notes on our website, theshowrunnershow.com.
Thank you so much for taking the time and doing this with us.
Absolutely, anytime at all.